Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Savage NASCAR podcast. It has been a long time since I've done an interview on my channel. I'm also known as Christian Wilson, and today we got a very special guest with us, former NASCAR driver Johnny Allen. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine this morning.
Awesome. We got a lot of things and a lot of things to get into, a lot of questions, and I'm very interested in learning about your career. And first off, I gotta ask the question I usually ask drivers that come on to the show, and that is, how did you get involved in racing?
Well, I got involved as a teenager in Los Angeles with my dad taking me to races. He wasn't necessarily he was a car fan. He loved cars, but he didn't go to races. But he took me to baseball games, football games, things like he wanted me. Anyway, he took me some car races, and I went to a midget race on a dirt track down in Culver City, California, and it was in the wintertime, and all the Indianapolis famous Indianapolis drivers would go to California back then. This was in late 40s, and they would go out to California and they'd run the midgets and sprint cars because they couldn't run back east, so they'd go out there and they could run six, 7 times a week and make livings. Anyway, they were all out there, and that really impressed me, and it was thrilling, and I loved to drive, and I just got hooked on it.
Awesome. Now, from what I've read, you were born in Greenville, South Carolina, if I'm correct. That's your hometown. I actually grew up in Gaffney, South Carolina, which is about an hour from Greenville. So you started, you went out west, you're racing out there. And in the 50s, you started getting involved in USAC stock series. You were also doing convertible races and getting into NASCAR with their different divisions with Grand National, etc. So how did you get your start, or where did you find your passion for racing? What made you be like, I want to become a race car driver?
Well, let me correct something. Did not understand you to say I was born in Greenville, South Carolina.
From what I've read, you were from Greenville, South Carolina, but please correct me if I'm wrong.
I raced out of Greenville, but I was born in Los Angeles, California.
Okay.
There's different things that you read about me came up in different places. They had me from different areas that I lived in for a while I was racing. Anyway, I was born and raised in Los Angeles. That's where, and then I went into the service. And when I got out of the service, I got connected in Corpus Christi, Texas, with a guy, and he was ran a couple of races out there in one of his cars, and he got hooked on the idea of coming to NASCAR, and of course I encouraged that. I was all excited about moving on with my career, and so as we got together and pooled our sources and headed east to Daytona. That was in February of 1956.
So you said you served in Corpus Christi, Texas. You served in the military?
In the Navy.
Navy. Well, thank you for your service. And you said you went to Daytona in 56. You raced at did you race the Daytona beach course or the beach?
Yes. That was the only course there then. The Speedway wasn't built till 59.
Correct. Yep, and I mean, I've looked at all the pictures. I've seen some videos from the beach course and everything. It looked really interesting because they had two long straightaways, of course, the sweeping turn. I mean, the races then a lot of cars would enter. I mean, I saw somewhere where 134 cars were entered into one NASCAR race at one time. But could you tell us a little bit about your experience racing on the beach? Because I bet that was pretty intense, but also fun.
Well, it was certainly a big challenge, and uh, I guess you make fun out of any race when when you love racing. But it was a difficult place to really race that much because the beach was so wide and there were so many cars. Anyway, it was just a unless you started up near the front and you had a good fast car, the rest of it was just a struggle of survival.
Yeah.
And that I was kind of in that pack. Didn't survive either, but anyway.
Well, going back a little bit to California, what was some of the tracks that you raced at out there? I know there was Riverside was a track that Grand National Series raced at for a long time, and different other touring divisions. What was some of the tracks that you raced at out west?
Well, I've ran some of the shorter tracks. Actually, when I didn't race out there until 1959 when I left NASCAR and went to USAC. Well, back then it was AAA, I think. Anyway, it was USAC, and they had a stock car division. And I went to Indianapolis in '59 to hopefully to get into majors and sprint car racing because I kind of had my goal set long term and get to be able to race it in Indianapolis 500. And of course, you need to be in the open wheel cars back then, and so I got with another guy. We got a car together, a '57 Chevrolet, and in '59 we went to up to Indianapolis and got a set up there with a garage to work out of. Anyway, the first race we ran with the USAC race was in Milwaukee. It was a 250-mile race there in Milwaukee, and we finished second in that race, so that was encouraging. And we come back, then we ran some more short track races, and ran a mark race in Dayton, Ohio, and won it. And then when they threw that's when went to coin and a couple of the mile dirts that USAC ran. Then we went out to California for at the end of the season and ran Carol's. What's not Ascot, but Clovis, a small short track, and Clovis, another short track, 2 or 3 short track, and just little tracks that USAC was running. And then we went to Las Vegas, was the last race on the old horse track. And that was a mess, dusty and dirty. We ended up wrecking the car and came back. I went back to Atlanta, and the guy that I was in partners with, he took a wrecked car and took it to Arizona and worked with Bill Cheeseburg and Roger McCluskey. They were Indianapolis drivers, and they ran the stock car circuit too. And he got to be friends with them, and they said they were going to build a new car for the next year. And if he didn't have a job, he wanted to come and help them build a car. He was impressed the way our car ran and the way it looked. It was nice, Anyway, had a good car, even though it was a '57 Chevrolet, and we were running against 59-mile cars. We still did well. Like I say, we were in second in one race, won one. But anyway, he stayed to help them, but they were building a new car for their sponsor for the next year. And anyway, so he calls me and says, "Look, I went back to California to spend Christmas at home with my parents." And he calls me and he says, "You got a car? Got something to drive to Daytona?" I said, "No." He says, "Well, I got a car for you if you want to drive it." So anyway, what the sponsor decided, he wanted to run this car at Daytona that they were building. And of course, they couldn't run Daytona because back then NASCAR and USAC didn't GR.
Yeah.
And so so I had already told them when I left NASCAR that I was going to do that. So anyway, they said, "Well, when you want to come back, it's going to cost you." Anyway, so, but I couldn't turn that down because I knew, Don Bailey, my partner, and he did anything he worked on, it was going to be first class. And they had a big money sponsor. So I knew I'd have a good ride. And so I agreed and ended up running fifth in the race at Daytona in 1960. And I run 11th in 59 there in a 57 Chevrolet. So anyway, that put me back in NASCAR, and the car owner was impressed. He said, "You guys want to just take that car and run it?" And he says, I'll finance it, and you run it NASCAR." And McCluskey and Cheeseburg they have time to build a new car before the USAC circuit starts up. So we ended up with a car, and I ran that in 1960.
Awesome. A lot of things I didn't know, and thank you for sharing that with us. Roger McCluskey, first time I've heard of him was I got a diecast car of the number one, I think it was Plymouth Superbird that he drove in USAC, was the first time I'd seen or heard of him. But yeah, you raced 8 races in the convertible series in 58, 59, finished the top 10 twice. The inaugural Daytona 500, as you mentioned, you finished in I finished 11th. In 1960, you finished 5th in that race. You had also raced with USAC, as you mentioned, in 58, 59. So going into 1960, you had made the commitment to driving NASCAR. Were you still looking at other things or other series to race in the 60s?
No, because in 59, during that time I was up there in Indianapolis, I had a couple of guys that were going to try to help me get a ride in a sprint car, or major, to get you, if you get, because you got to start out there in USAC. You did back then. You had to be recommended before you could move up.
Yeah.
But I never could. They're pretty tight click up there, and there was a lot of good, accomplished open wheel drivers that were looking for cars to drive. And about the only thing, I had a couple offers that I could start with. There, guy back, it was a shade tree operation, and I looked the cars over and I said, "I don't know." And these guys were trying to help me get started. Says, "No, you don't want to drive that. You just you're not going to do any good. And if you get over your head, you're going to get hurt. Just you best stay out of there. Let me get you a chance in something that's, we'll get you something good." But that was 59 and the end of the year, and then all this offer to come back to NASCAR with a good car where I knew I could make some money, and I thought, well, I need to give that up for now. And it never did up here. I had a pretty good career going on and off.
Mm-hmm.
It just didn't have never had a big sponsor, and I had some good cars, but it's hard to hard to get them. And I was just running mostly the big races because the little short races they didn't pay hardly anything, and there really weren't any cars worth driving.
Yeah.
And so it sort of it did what I had to do in between to make money so I could continue to race and had some good runs. I finished third in 1959 in the firecracker race, the July 4th race at Daytona.
Mm-hmm.
Finished third, yeah. Barball Roberts won it in a Smoky Unix Pontiac, and Joe Weatherly was second in a home Moody Ford, and I was third in a 59 Chevrolet. So that was a good finish. And so I had some good. It was right after that race that I went to NASCAR headquarters and told them I was going to USAC, and they told me I was crazy. I had a good career going there. I need to stay. Hard-headed. I was going to do what I'm going to do.
That's awesome. So one thing I want to ask you before you get talk about, I was going to bring up something in 1961, but I was wanting to ask you. I've always been intrigued by the convertibles that they drove in the 50s. I don't really know honestly much of the difference between the convertibles and the other cars, but what was the convertibles like driving those? Was there any differences or anything that you would say was like better, or was it easier to drive? I know I've seen pictures of them at Daytona and I thought they looked really cool, but what was it like to drive in the convertibles?
Well, I didn't really run that many convertible races. In fact, the first convertible race I ran was that 60 Chevrolet that I had brought from USAC down at Daytona. At Darlington in May of '60. They had a convertible race,
Mm-hmm.
and they couldn't get it. They didn't have enough convertibles to make a good field of cars, and so Bill France offered anybody that wanted to take their hardtop and make a convertible out of it for that race, he'd give them $500.
Hmm.
And so we decided we'd do that. So you could cut it off and fix it where you put it back after, anyway. So we did that, and we ran that race, and it's different. There's a lot more, you get the wind coming in there, and the cars are pretty light on the back end. There's a lot of drag on a convertible. But anyway, we ended up wrecking in that race, and that's where it tore down the scoring stand and that totaled that car. So we ended up had to start over with a different sponsor.
Yeah.
But anyway, that race, and then I ran convertibles on 2 or 3 short tracks, but never on the high speed tracks like Daytona or Charlotte or any of those tracks. But the guys that drove them, they had driven both cars. They said the convertibles were really a lot of drag. They were just so slow because of the, just wind go over the windshield, and it would just, have a kind of a back pull on you to hold you down.
Mm-hmm.
And but on the short tracks, they worked great. They really handled great. I ran them on 2 or 3 short tracks for different guys. I was just kind of picking up stuff here and there, and they really. Of course, they were a lot lighter, and then didn't have that top weight of your top, so they handle a lot better. In the wind, you weren't running that fast with the wind drag to be a problem. But it was fun. They were open. It was kind of like open wheel racing. But they didn't have a lot of races, and they didn't pay much. And I didn't have a good connection.
All right. That's interesting. And it leads into the next question I had, which you kind of just mentioned. The 1960 Rebel 300 at Darlington, you blew a tire, you went over the wall and hit a scoring stand in the Chevrolet convertible. Honestly, First time I saw it on YouTube, I was like, where was this at? Like, I was just shocked. And honestly, I think it's one of the most famous wrecks in NASCAR history. Could you take us through that wreck and your experience with that? Because I'm sure it was pretty scary.
Yeah, I have no trouble recalling that one. That was a scary situation. You know, you never get scared when you're wrecking, unless it's a long slide and the wall's coming to you. Then you got time. But most of the time, everything happens so quick, and you're trying to mind's running ahead of you, and you're trying to do everything you can to either avoid or make it, do the best situation out of it you can. But that, I think we were running third at the time, and we blew the guy that was really eating up tires really bad, and a lot of them already changed tires. And the Firestone guy came down to Stolen Dawn, my partner, and mechanic, chief or whatever. Told him, says, you better get Johnny in. There's guys that their tires are in the course when they come in, and he's lapped them. And so Don was out there. Back then you had to go out on the racetrack with a signboard because you pitted over the wall on the track side, and he's out there holding the board up. And as I was coming through 3 and 4 for him to show me the board there on the front straightaway, I blew the right rear tire. And what happened? I'd worn it through the cords, and it blew out. And the car started spinning, and I couldn't get it to go back up against the guardrail where I could get it straightened out. So I just started to go ahead and spin it around. I locked down the brakes to spin it, and when I did, the right front blew, and the car just shot back up the racetrack and went, kind of made a little hop up on top of the guardrail. Mm-hmm. And there's the caution lights back then. They had them on a big board sitting right outside the guardrail, back 2 or 3 places around the racetrack, showing the caution lights if there was a caution. And I was in the area and I was looking at that big board coming at me, or me coming at it anyway, with a caution light board, and it looked like it was going to come right through the windshield. And because I was in the air, there was nothing I could do. And you can't get down on the seat or anything because you're in a seatbelt. So I just thought, well, I put my head down, and hopefully my helmet would, absorb some of the impact of the glass, and just the last second, what can you do? And that's all I could do. And went there. Next thing I know, it's flipping over, and sand and dirt and stuff's all coming up inside the car, and then there was a big hard hit, and then the car just dropped to the ground, and that was it. And anyway, got to looking at what happened. It just took a chunk out of the bottom of that caution board. Took about I don't know, maybe 8 inches covered it, something of it, and like with the top of the windshield. And anyway, the car flipped over, and it hit that scoring stand, and it hit upside down, which was a blessing, because if it would hit with my, front to top, which you had no top, it was a convertible. If I'd have hit there, it'd probably killed me. Because that was the stand that the scores stayed in, and it was on big high poles because they had to be up over where they could see over the bank to score the cars. And what had happened, it flipped, and as the car went upside down, it hit those poles and knocked the supports out of one end of the stand, and part of the stand fell down. Yeah. And the stairway going up, took it out, and but it didn't. Nobody got hurt except the cameraman that had his camera was filming the wreck, and the impact I was even cut around his eye with it. Anyway, I didn't, I didn't know where I was or what happened because I'm laying upside down in under the car. You got to wait. You can't get too quick to get out of the car because sometimes it'll flip like that and then it'll get quiet and you think you're stopped and maybe you're in the air and you're still going and turn the seatbelt loose and then there's a lot of guys that got killed doing that. So anyway, so I always wait. Then I started to crawl out under the car to see where I was and what happened. And that was the worst scare I ever had. I mean, I looked and I saw that stand collapse because I was just right close to it where I ended up. If I hadn't hit it, I'd have been out in the parking lot. But and I thought, right away I had this flash of seeing mutilated people, that I thought I went through the stand. I knew there's people up there. But I didn't go through it. I went under it. But I was looking around and my heart was in my mouth. Horrible thing to think, that you're going to see that. And but by the time finally somebody got over there and I was already out of the car by then. But that was scary.
Yeah.
And just like when I saw that I was gonna go through that sign. I mean that caution light board, and thinking it was going to tear the windshield out.
Yeah.
It steered. No thought of fear or anything came to it. It's just this was probably what's going to happen. What can I do? And you do it. You don't.
Yeah.
You don't have time to get scared about it.
Yeah. I mean that definitely was crazy, and miraculously, thankfully no one was injured except for a cameraman. You mentioned I didn't even know that a cameraman was injured in that, but wow, I mean what a story, and that definitely I would have been terrified, and I mean I couldn't imagine how that went, but thankfully you're here to tell the story, and you've had a lot of crazy wrecks in your career. We'll get to that also in a little bit, but before that we're going to take a quick break real quick for a little bit. We're going to start a new meeting up, and we'll get continued on with the story, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. Before we get back to the interview, if you haven't yet, go check out my social medias. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'm pretty much on everything. You can see those on the screen and also in the description below. Hope you all have enjoyed the interview so far. And if you haven't yet, please hit the like and subscribe button. It would mean a lot to me and it would help my channel grow. So if y'all could do that, that'd be amazing. And let's get right back to this interview. And we're back here on today's show with our special guest, Johnny Allen. We recently just talked about his Darlington wreck in 1960, but now we're moving on to 1961 was the first race at Bristol, the Volunteer 500. And in this race, Jack Smith was driving the number 46 Pontiac, but Johnny, you took over the wheel of that car and on lap 292 and got the win. It wasn't officially listed as your win, but you helped out with that win. And could you tell us, or maybe if you could recall that race that day?
Oh yeah, I recall that one. That was a big day, and I started the race in a Chevrolet. I had a 61 Chevrolet and my rear end burned up early in the race. And so I was out of the car and I was just hanging around the pit area to see if maybe somebody might need relief because it was a 500 lap race and it was in July. And it was really hot, and so I thought somebody might need relief. Anyway, what happened was Jack Smith was getting his leg was getting burnt because of an exhaust leak or something that was. Anyway, he was leading the race at the time, but he wasn't gonna be able to continue because he was burning up. So he sent the pit crew out and they knew I was out of the race. And I'd worked with Jack before, and we were good friends. Anyway, he sent for me, and Jack came in and got out of the car when he was leading the race when he came in for me to take over. And I don't know if he had a lap lead or what, two, or couldn't tell back then. Anyway, I got in the car, and Jack is really big, and I was pretty small, so I had to cinch up best I could. Anyway, I got back out on the track, and time I got used to the car, and we lost a good bit of time. Anyway, I ended up, I think I still was in the lead, so he must have been 2 or 3 laps ahead. And I remember Richard Petty was running second, and about a straightaway behind me, and I was able to maintain the lead till the end of the race. I think Fireball ran second. I think he was a couple laps down, but the car drove a lot. It was a lot faster than my Chevrolet, but anyway, it was hot in there, but there was no way I was going to get out.
Yeah,
I kind of expected Jack, once he got cooled off and rested up, that he would call me in so that he'd be in the car at the finish, but he never did. I really couldn't afford to lose a couple laps changing drivers. So, yeah. But anyway, I was happy to see the checker flag and to share the winners' honors or whatever with Jack. We got pictures of Jack and I sitting on top of the car with the reef, and his I think his son was one of ones there too. Anyway, and Jack shared the winnings with me too.
Oh, that's awesome. I don't remember
what that was, but I thought that was so that was a good day because I really needed the money. I hadn't had a good car for a while.
And I bet, I mean, that, as you mentioned, is a special day. And I didn't even know the reason. When I've read in like some of my books, I didn't know that Jack Smith had, like, his leg was burning up. I didn't know about that. And you went out there and you won by 2 laps, if I'm correct, from what my research was. You won by 2 laps in that race. And yeah, it definitely was a special moment. Now, let's talk about your win at Bowman Gray in '62. Was the Myers Brothers 200 at Bowman Gray. So you ended up winning that race by only 6 inches over Rex White. And from what I heard, y'all crashed across the line and you got the win. Can you tell us about that? Because, man, I wish there was video of that.
Well, that was an exciting race. I was driving for Holly Farms at the time. Junior Johnson had been driving for him in '62, and he and the crew chief got where they weren't getting along. They were leading races, and car was breaking. Something happened to their race, and so he told the sponsors, the owners of the car, says, you need to get rid of Crawford, or I'm going to have to quit, because he's just not maintaining the car like he should. And of course, Crawford's defense was, Junior Johnson would break an anvil. There's no way anybody going to keep a car under him because he's just hard. He's wide open or stop. That's all his 2 speeds. And so anyway, Junior was, of course, lived there at Holly Farms, and he was really good, close friends with the owners of Holly Farms, and they didn't want to fire him, and I think Crawford had moved his family up there, so it kind of put them in a situation. Finally, ended up that they did a tire test right before the May 600 at Charlotte, and I don't know if he blew a tire or what happened, but anyway, he got it in the wall. I don't know what the cause was, but the junior got out of the car. He said, "That's it, I quit," and he quit him.
Wow.
It was right before the Charlotte 600, and Crawford Clemens. He knew anyway. He knew. I mean, anyway, he called me. Called me at the time. I was supposed to be driving for Red Boat, who had a '62 Pontiac, but the sponsor was not able to run many races because he just didn't have the funds to do it, and so he called me. You know, when Crawford called me, he offered me that ride. That was that was going to be a permanent ride, and it was a top running car, and of course, Red Boat's car was fast too. But anyway, I needed something solid, so I went to Red and then told him about it. I said, "I hate to leave you," but he said, "Hey, I can't promise you anything. You got to look after you. It's you you need to go. You need to do that." So that was great. That relieved me of the pressure there. But so anyway, I moved to North. Well, not me initially. I went up there and I ran the race. The first race was a 600 at Charlotte, and in the qualified up to the top. I don't know, top 10. I think the top 5 because I ended up leading the race a few laps before pit stops, 1 or 2 laps. I don't know anyway. And anyway, ran. I don't remember exactly, but anyway, come into pits and we went back out and didn't run long at all. And the harmonic balancer come apart on the front of the crankshaft. It went up into the radiator and got the fan. And so it come in and they put a new fan on. Anyway, they got it back out. Of course, I think at 20 something laps behind. But they said, "Well, just once you go back out there and just want to finish the race. We haven't been finishing any races, but we just go out there and run the good, running hard, go running hard." So I did. And I think I ended up gaining 1 lap back or maybe 2. But so there, our first race, and here I have a mechanical problem, just like Junior been having. Anyway, and that's kind of the way it went the rest of the year. We always ran good, and I had all kinds of mechanical problems, things that other Pontiacs had, and they had a fix for it. And Crawford never seemed to get the message, and our car always. There's a lot of Pontiacs out there back in '62. They were all built the same place up at Ray Nichols. And so, no reason. And anyway, so that it's in Holly Farms had a '61 Pontiac that they had run the year before, that they had been running. Junior had been running on some short tracks, and so we would run that on some short tracks. At Winston-Salem, that was a short track for sure.
Yeah.
Went there with a car, and Rex White was qualified on the pole, and I qualified outside pole. And Rex had won several races there. He was excellent short track driver. Anyway, we ended up running the race bumper to bumper and side by side, and Rex led it for a while, and then I got the lead for a while. Then I think Rex had it again anyway. It ended up I was leading the race, and it was a 200 lap race, and no cautions. I don't think. I can't remember any. And it ended up coming through the 3rd and 4th turn, and I'm leading the race, and Rex is right on my bumper, and he's been trying to pass me, but traffic, it's really a narrow, short track, and passing is crowded enough, and there's no such thing as 3 abreast. So I came up on the car through the 3rd and 4th turn, and I had the lap, and I went down past him underneath to to make sure Rex didn't get a run underneath me,
Yeah.
because I knew what that would mean. And so I went down low, but as we come off the corner, I was able to move up a little bit to go down straightaway. And I don't know how Rex got any traction down there, but in some way or another, he got a run coming off the corner, and he shot up to my door as we were going down the straightaway, and he had some momentum, and it looked like he was going to beat me to the line. And there, the starting line it's down close to the corner. It's not back to the middle straightaway. And of course, that track is just short anyway. If you don't back off before you get to the start finish line, you're not going to make the turn.
Yeah.
And so I had a choice right there. It just not even a second. Instant choice: back off and not wreck and let Rex win the race, or stay on the gas, beat him to the line, and hope you don't tear the car up too bad, because I knew I couldn't get through the corner without spinning it or wrecking it. So anyway, I said, well, I've crashed faster than this, and that was the I guess that's the wisdom of my decision. I said, no way, I'm not going to win this race, even if it means crashing. So I did, but I beat him by the chief scorer, which was Morris Metcalf back then. He had watched, because Rex and I had run back and forth the whole race really close, and he knew he felt sure it was going to be a really close finish. He sent another guy down to the start finish line. He says, you go down there, and I want you to be right there on the start finish line. And you need to call this, because they didn't have any cameras or any kind of stuff back then, not for short tracks. Anyway, I'm glad he did, because I said I only beat him by about a half a foot, or a foot maybe at the most. And I went into the guardrail, tore the right front up, and to walk back to the finish line for the trophy.
Wow. Well, I bet that definitely was really crazy. I mean, battling for the win there. Bowman Gray is a very short track. It's like less than half a mile. I've been there. I've gone to races when I was younger there, and it is a very narrow track, and it's also known as the Madhouse. A lot of people like to bump each other and spin each other out of that place. But man,
well, it's not that they like to do it. It's you have to do it for survival. You have to. It's just two abreast is really crowded. It's only a quarter mile, and it's really flat. There's no bank, so it's just really you gotta, if you're starting back in the field and you're going to get to the front, you're going to have to move some people over. You don't really need to spin them, but sometimes you move them at the wrong time, or they react wrong and they spin. Anyway, it's an action track for sure, and it still draws crowds every week.
Yes, for sure. And just for those listening right now, Crawford, Johnny mentioned Crawford. He was a car owner. His name was Spook Crawford, if I'm correct. He was a car owner back in the day. He had Plymouths, but I bet that would have been. I mean, that was crazy. I don't know if there's any photos of that race or not, but definitely gotta figure that out. And thanks for sharing that with us. So in 61, you finished 12th in points in the Grand National Series, and you ended up finishing 7th in points in 1957. There were some years you finished in top 15 in points. Now, also in 1962, you wrecked at Darlington again. You had another wreck there in the Southern 500. That time, the car caught in flames, and you got out of that car. And it's crazy. I mean, if going back and looking at some of those wrecks, I mean, that's I'm sure is terrifying. And I mean, you were on your hood in that one wreck in 62, and you were able to get out of that car. But I feel like with you, I mean, it's crazy. You were uninjured in those wrecks, including also in 63, you had a wreck at Atlanta where he went over the wall as well. and the Dixie 400, you went over the wall, and the engine landed like 100 feet from your car, and you basically every one of those wrecks you walked out uninjured with maybe a couple scratches or so, but I mean you went through a lot, and being someone that drove independently at time or for car owners you're trying to make in the sport, what were some more of the challenges that you faced in the sport?
Well, those wrecks were all, causing of, blown tires or
Mm.
things. Except the one at Darlington where I caught fire. I had some oil. We were running real good. We were running the top 4 or 5, and had a good shot of winning the race. Anyway, went after our pit stop, last pit stop, and went out, and I was running behind Marvin Panch, and I'd been trying to pass him for a couple of laps, trying to get him set up, and he went down into the first turn back then, and he all of a sudden Marvin went up, and I thought he got in too hard, and the car slid up. But this is my opportunity, so I dove down underneath him, and when I did, I hit some oil. And the reason he moved up, he saw the oil on the track, and he moved up to avoid the oil. Leroy Yarborough was blowing an engine, and that was the oil. But so he knew it was there, and it moved up. And when I went underneath him, of course, wide open to try to pass him, and the car just shot up the racetrack toward the guardrail, and I tried to get it corrected, but it had too much momentum. Got into the guardrail, and it hooked it somehow or another and turned up on the side, and it was sliding along on the driver's side of the racetrack, and we didn't have any window nets or any of that then, and I'm trying to hold my shoulder up, I make sure I don't get out, on the racetrack, and hold that, and nothing you can do. I'm on my side. I can't do anything, but to hang on and get along for the ride. And then it just turned back over. It slowly turned back over as it slowed down, because the bank's pretty steep, and it rolled up on this top, and was turning as it was sliding down the track. Well, we didn't have any fuel cells. I don't think we even had fuel cells back there, but we didn't have any check valves in the gas tank, and he had a vent right that came up right below the back, right behind the back glass. And anyway, when the car was upside down, we had just fueled up. The fuel was running out the vent. And I saw that later, in the videos and stuff. But the fuel was running out on the track, and the sparks from the car sliding ignited the fuel. And it was kind of like a fuse. It was following the car down as I was sliding around the track and down toward the infield. And then all of a sudden the car, I kept waiting for some car to drive through the side of me, because I knew it was still sliding from all the grinding noise and stuff. I was still on the track, and I'm still sliding. And there again, you're upside down. Nothing you can do. And somebody had run into the side of me, in the driver's side. That probably would have killed me instantly. So I'm just hanging on, and the car to go by, and he missed me, and he missed me. And the next thing you know, the car kind of just exploded. And so I started trying to get out, because I said, I don't know if I'm going to get hit or what, but I'm not going to sit here and get burned up.
Yeah.
So, and I had been upside down before. Well, at Darlington in that convertible race, and another time, and I knew how to get when you're upside down to get out, turn the seatbelt loose, because if you don't, you can get tangled up in everything, and you can get trapped in there. So, but I was able to do that, and just get out to out of the car as it was. It all it erupted inside, but it was as I was getting out, I was just blessed. I was tell you
Yeah.
with all those things, and I got out of the car. My mother, dad, and sister had come out from California on vacation to see the race, and they were sitting up in the Holly Farms. And I was driving for Holly Farms up in their grandstand thing they had there anyway, and they were sitting there watching it. And when I got out of the car, on the opposite side from where their grandstand was, and of course all the smoke and stuff they couldn't see, and the flames. Yeah, they couldn't see me getting out of the car for quite a bit. It seemed like them for forever. So it was terrifying for them too.
Yeah.
They a lot more terrifying for them than it was me because I was busy.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, that definitely will be a scary sight. And Darlington was one of the most dangerous tracks back in the day. I mean, 50s, 60s, 70s, it was a dangerous track. I mean, with the guardrail, there was a lot of bad accidents, but thankfully over time there was improvements and innovations and different things they put in place to make the track safer. But going on a little bit to 63, you ran a touring race, if I'm correct. You ran a 3-hour road touring race at Daytona in 63. What type of car were you driving? I know you ended up finishing second, but what type of cars were you driving then?
What I finish there?
I've read that you finished second in that race in 63.
Yeah, a touring car race.
Yes.
I was driving a Corvette for Red Bull.
Okay. Well, alrighty. I know like another car owner that you drove for was Roy Tyner. He was a car owner that you drove for before, but now let's talk a little bit about like towards 67. Was your last year in the Grand National Series. Once it was your last year, did you have any plans once you stopped racing NASCAR? Did you race anywhere else, or like what did you do after the Grand National Series?
Well, 60, actually, yeah, 63 was really the last year I had anything. 64, let's see, yeah, 64. I would go to the track and pick up different things. But anyway, what I did after that, I decided that there wasn't any future in racing, and there wasn't really. I mean, all your top guys over the years, your superheroes and stuff. You know, Fireball Roberts, Buck Baker, Junior Johnson. You know, all those guys. They were all out of racing and doing something toward the future. Usually, about in the late 30s. It's about mid to late 30s. Most of them were out of racing into something because there just wasn't any money in it. It wasn't getting any better. So anyway, so I just got I got tired of trying to find something to drive that would be competitive, and once you're up, you're competitive and to win races, you're not satisfied with sitting back and hoping you get 20th place. That's not to me anyway. There's some guys that they're happy to do that, and that's just to be there, and that's fine. But I can't if I'm not progressing and being able to be competitive in whatever I do. I lose interest, look for something else, and I didn't want to, I love to race, and I don't race now, of course, but I still love to watch them and to think about them. But so anyway, I married and I had some more responsibilities, but I got with a guy here that was running this local track on Saturday nights, and started driving for him, and then I started a business. Actually, he was partners with me, and
Okay.
we started a tire and wheel business here in Greenville, and ran on weekends. It ate Greenville Pickens, and then sometimes we go to Hickory, sometimes we go Columbia, sometimes Savannah, and run run there on weekends, and could run my business during the week. So I got to still be able to do my racing and be able to build a future.
Alrighty. So I actually I was gonna bring this up later on, but I was gonna ask you now. So you were in the Carolinas. You moved back up to Indianapolis area and all that. You had your business. And as you mentioned, you still watch NASCAR today, correct?
Oh yes.
What do you think about the sport now? What's your opinions on the sport now and how things are going with the sport? Because it has changed so much. And, personally, I think that there's just been a lot of negatives, but also there's been positives in regard to safety. So what is your opinion on the sport now?
Well, there's there've been changes over the years. Most of them I was not too happy with. I thought I was stuck to stock cars and kept it more stock. Well, I ran. It was strictly stock when I ran it. The engine had to be stock. And the car that overall had to be stock, and had some leeway, but not a lot. And it was just you could come in like I did with not knowing anything, not having any money, and work your way in there, even though it didn't pay much, but you could run cheap. You didn't have to cost you a lot of money. And as they started to get changes, all the changes meant more money, and it meant less people had an opportunity.
Yeah.
But as far as the sport and being able to drive them now, I would love to be. I would think, I think this was a great change. Going to this car, and it looks like their whole idea behind all this international sport, and where the drivers in Formula One and the INC, so I guess the CCA and those guys, that would be these cars would be more adaptable for them because of the the way the cars are set up, the suspensions and aerodynamics and all that, and they're really, so it's more competitive because there's so many. With the rules now, the cars are all, it's about like the old IROC series. All the cars are equal. You just draw a number and that's what you drive. But it's a little more, individual situation now with, teams have the cars, but they're so close to being identical. And if a guy has enough money, if he's a billionaire or has to be awful close to try to come in there, first thing is he's got to buy somebody out before he can even have a shot at getting in a race. So it's got to be really, really big money and less and less opportunities. And the drivers are, they're coming in really young, but by the time when they come in, they've already got 10 years or more experience when they come up. 10, 15 years. When I came in, I had zero. I was 21 and had zero experience, and just got out there and started racing.
Wow. Well, I definitely agree with some things you said. The sport and with the car, they've gone away from stock, and it's more technological, which then again can be good. It could definitely benefit regarding stats and like figuring out the car, stuff like that. But I feel like they've gone too advanced in a way with that. But I definitely get your points. Now, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll get into the final segment of our show. And we'll be right back after this short break. Do you enjoy onboards? If you do, follow NASCAR onboards on Instagram, run by me and my bro Mike. If you haven't yet, go check out our awesome content on the page. We're almost to 10K, which is absolutely incredible, and we're so thankful. But anyways, thank y'all so much for your support, and we're going to get into the last segment of our interview with Johnny Allen. And we are back here on the podcast here in the final segment. And we got a couple more questions for you, Johnny. And the next one I got is this. So you raced with the likes of like Richard Petty, Paul Goldsmith, Junior Johnson, Fred Lorenzen, and a lot of great drivers. But who was the toughest competitor that you ever raced against, in your opinion?
Curtis Turner.
Curtis. Now, with Curtis, I've heard things and stories about him. He had, of course, had some feuds with Big Bill at times. But were you ever like with racing against with Curtis? What made him the toughest competitor to race against, and was he friendly at all?
Not really. With me, I was not in the same social league with him. He was, supposedly rich, and that was anyway. He bought and sold timberland, so he would be in and out of the money, and a very a big party guy, and just knew no fear. And in the race car, he just had the greatest sense of timing and coordination of any driver I ever saw. He could take any car. I saw him on several occasions and heard plenty of stories where he was sitting in a grandstand watching a race with somebody and decide he'd go down there to the pit area. He'd go down there and there's always somebody would be willing to give him a car, and he'd get in the car, and a car that had been running, mid pack, and in no time he'd end up leading the race and winning. But he just was ruthless. I mean, he did not let anything get in his way, and if it meant moving them or spinning them or you bouncing off of them to get through the corner faster, that's what he did. And he was, but he didn't have to do that because he had the talent. But when he was racing with the Ford factory team, he would be leading the race and have 2 or 3 laps lead on a dirt track, and just keep going. And the track would get rough and big holes in it, and the car, instead of going around the holes, the fastest way was through them. You just keep hammering through it till something broke on the car, and just that's just the way he drove. And you knew if you looked in the mirror and you saw he was catching you knew to stay low on the racetrack, because if you stayed up a little bit, that just meant he didn't have to back off. He'd run in the corner and just use you for a bank shot. So, but he was but he just had talent. He was just super talented. Probably the smartest and smoothest was Fireball Roberts. He was just very smart, fast driver, and he knew when to go fast and when to, and he's just if I was a car owner, that's who I would hire. I wouldn't hire Curtis Turner.
Yeah, I mean, Fireball Roberts was a great driver as well. And with Curtis Turner, I mean, with what you shared, I mean, kind of reminds me of a lot of like going through the decades. With the 70s, there was drivers like there were 70s, 80s, Darrell Waltrip was kind of like that, moved people all the way. Dale Earnhardt, Kyle Busch would be another one I'd think of with regarding that. But so I've heard from people and drivers that NASCAR, usually the drivers, everyone's a big family. But was that different in the 60s? I'm sure, of course, you had friends on the track, but how was the community like with NASCAR back in the day compared to now? Was it actually like a big family, or was it just on and off the track there would be feuds? Or could you share a little bit about that with us?
Well, definitely different now. I mean, back then, the driver was in a lot of cases was a car owner,
Yeah.
and if not, you were driving for somebody that maybe owned a gas station or a body shop or restaurant business or something like that. I mean, somebody that couldn't have, it wasn't a big money man, so you had more respect for your cars, which naturally would mean you're going to have a little more respect for your other guys' cars too. But there again, you want to win, and you do what you have to do. And that, if you had to move guys and do it, but you tried to do it with some respect, and hopefully they would return it. But as far as if you had a problem, like most guys, there's a lot of us towed our car behind a truck, a pickup truck, or our car, or whatever we had. And if we had a problem with like the suspension, we wreck and tear up where you couldn't tow it because it had to have some serious repairs.
Oh. So,
excuse me. And then some of them would have a trailer that they trailered on, and so what you do if this guy with a trailer, if he saw you needed help, he would put my car on the trailer, and I'd tow his car back to my place, and then we'd switch back. You'd help people out like each other out, or come over when the race was over, or somebody that wrecked or had a problem and was having to try to fix the car where they could tow it to go home. Mm-hmm. They would stay and help you so you could get back. So we had more of a family type thing there, and we would try to meet the same restaurant and eat and things like that.
Well, that definitely is interesting. And I've read stories about some drivers driving their own cars to the races themselves back then, and it's much different now with the haulers and everything. And the drivers didn't drive their own cars. Drivers don't work on their own cars compared to back then. But I guess now I want to move on to two questions real quick. What was your favorite track that you ever raced on, and what was the toughest track that you ever raced on in your career?
They're both the same, Darlington.
Oh. Yeah, Darlington, with the high banks, and we talked about it earlier. Darlington was a dangerous track, and it can be really tough and demanding. I mean, some of the races back then, 500 miles, of course, with Southern 500, and in the heat of South Carolina, I could definitely understand that, and I agree with that. I mean, it could definitely be a fun track, but also tough. But now, last year, I met you at the Racers Reunion in Mount Airy. Are you coming to that again this year?
Coming to what?
Last year, I'd met you at the Racers Reunion in Mount Airy, and it's coming up on September 10th. Are you coming to that again this year?
I'm not going to be able to make it this year.
Oh. Right, understandable. Well, yeah, I remember when I had met you, I was trying to find in my giant NASCAR book, guys. I was like, I was trying to figure out where to sign, and you, of course, you signed the part with the '62 Bowman Gray, and then of course the Darlington flip. But man, I really enjoyed this interview with you. I want to read off some stats real quick for you. So you had 173 Grand National starts in your career, 19 top fives, 61 top tens, three poles. Your average finish was 16th. Your average start was 16th. And you had a best points finish of seventh in 1957. But as we close out the episode here today, Johnny, is there anything you would like to share or anything else you would like to say?
Yeah, I would like to say it was a greatest time in my life. I was able to uh, reach my dream, or was to be able to race. When I was watching the races with my dad, the first race, I said, boy, I'd love to be able to just go out and make a few laps just to see what it's like. And I'd like to do that today. It's just it's just so exciting, and I was glad that I was able to do that and to be successful at it. And I was successful for where I started, and the opportunities that I had as I progressed and learned more and got better cars, and ended up being able to run with the top ones from 60, 62, 61, 62, those years when I qualified for even on the pole, had three poles. And anyway, I was competitive, and a lot of times I'd outrun a lot of them. A lot of times I may finish fifth, but Richard Petty may end up seventh. So, so there was anyway, it was good, and it was a good period of time. I started out on racing on the old beach course, and I think I'm one of three that's still alive that did. And they had that experience, and then moved to the super speedway, ran the first race on the super speedway. He started dead last, finished 11th. And then so move into the super speedway period. The Atlanta and Charlotte, ran the first Charlotte 600, first Atlanta 500, finished second in the first Atlanta 500, and then it's progression. I got that far, and saw the factories get in a little bit, and it's in the 56, 7, and 8, and then they got back out. Anyway, it was a good period. Went from the dirt tracks, a little quarter-mile, half-mile dirt tracks around the country, and to the asphalt tracks and super speedways. So it was a good period of time, and it was hard, and I learned how to work hard and live cheap, because that's what it took.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of help along the way. I had a lot of people that helped me, sometimes financially, sometimes, giving me opportunities to drive a second car they had, just things like that. And very, very, sure, at times I didn't think a whole lot of NASCAR because they wouldn't pay any money, but today I think they should have shared a lot more of their ordinances they've established with the back in the day when we really needed it. But anyway, they did a super job of managing it and dominating. I mean, they're definitely in charge. You don't, you can complain, they'll listen to you, but if you say, look, you don't change things, I'm going to do this. You say, hey, we were here before you got here, and we'll be here when you leave. So
Yeah.
you could either uh, uh, go along with the rules, or you don't have to, but you don't have to race either. So
Hmm.
and that's what works. Because you can't get a bunch of drivers together and agree. You can't get a bunch of car owners together and agree, because we're competitive. We want to beat each other, and we want an advantage, and that's the reason they have all these fines and everything else. Is ones that get too greedy with their changes, and NASCAR slaps them down. So they've done a great job, and made a. And I'm glad to have been part of it back in the days. I wish I could have. I wish I could have had the finances to hang in there longer, but that's how it is. How it was, and I'm happy for that.
Yep. And I mean, uh, just hearing your story and hearing your career, there's just a lot of things to take away, a lot of things I've learned. And for those watching and listening, they've learned a lot too. And thank you so much for coming on to the show. And we really appreciate it. And thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing about your career and everything. We want to say thank you very much for coming on the show.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for putting it on, and where people can kind of get an idea of the early pioneer of the sport.
Yeah.
Because we're getting fewer and fewer, and that are still around. That when we had to go through all those trying times, but we did it for the love of racing.
Yeah.
And today, if they took all the money out of it, those drivers would all be looking for cars to drive because they love racing. And it's a competitive spirit in it. It's just nothing like it. It's just so all consuming. All sports are competitive. You want to beat your fellow man, but you only have certain things that you have to deal with. When you're out there in a race car, you've got to deal with the race car and to realize the capabilities of it and be able to keep it on the edge, but stay within that. And you got to be conscious of the racetrack because it changes and the groove change and things, and you got to be constantly aware of that and your braking points and back off points to have the fastest lap. So you got total concentration there. You're concentrating on the car, the sounds, the smell, and everything. And then, you got your pit crew, your pit stops coming up. You just don't. I know my wife she'd get really nervous going to races, and one of my friends told me how nervous she got. And I told her, I said, look, you don't need to go to the race. It's making you nervous. And she said, well, I want to be, I'm afraid that if I'm not there, you'll be worried about me. I said, look, I ain't got time to worry about anything. You don't realize how fully concentrated you have to be on everything that's going on. Of course, you got all the traffic too in the cars that you're racing against. You got to identify them and pick up their habits, their weak and strong points, and the way they drive. It's totally consuming concentration. So you're wore out mentally far more than you are physically. And these other sports, they want to say you're not a sport because it's not that physical. Well, it's still physical, but it's mentally. You got to really be sharp, and you can't. You got to be physically able because it's 130, 40 degrees in those cars, and you're in there we used to be in there 4 and 5 hours. Now they're still in them 3 hours or so. So it's something that the fans need to understand that and appreciate that.
For sure. Yeah. With I still find it crazy that there's people, and I've had people tell me in the past when I was younger, they're like, "Oh, NASCAR's not sport." I mean, it is. It is. It's a tough sport. I mean, the demands. I mean, even back then with when you were racing, all the dangers. But not only that, but like being in the car for 4 or 5 hours, it's long, and and you're putting so much effort into racing and going to pass people and all that. I mean, it is a sport. But uh, I don't have much really else to add. I will say before we end off this video, if y'all haven't yet, of course, hit the follow button, subscribe, and hit the like button as well. Make sure to spread this out to everyone y'all know. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. Make sure if you haven't yet, also go check out the NAS Boys podcast that I do with Mike and Cam. Make sure to follow NASCAR onboards account that me and Mike run. We just hit 8K, so thank y'all very much for that. Make sure to also go follow the social media accounts down below. Those will be in the description of this video. And that's all I got to say regarding that. But thank you so much, Johnny, for coming on the show. It's been a blast, and we'll keep in touch.
Well, thank you for setting it up. I enjoy it. It's always good to remember back, and that helps me when they have this opportunity. So, well, good luck with it, with the podcast, and I'll do what I can to promote it. So
awesome.
Thank you again, and Mike, thank you for your efforts. And so we'll be seeing you maybe at another. You don't go to Daytona in February, do you?
We'll see. We'll see about that. I'd love to, but we'll see where things go. I'm hoping to go to Talladega this year in Martinsville. But yeah, man. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and we'll catch you next time. And this has come to the end of the show today. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. And as I mentioned, make sure to like and follow, subscribe, and I'll see y'all later. Have a good one and a good afternoon.
All right. Thank you.